Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Nicola, who is going to take over here the interview process. Cheers, Nick.
Right. So, hi everybody. I'm going to start by going through some top tips in terms of getting ready and applying. So, that step before the interview. So, picking up on what Gavin's already said, you want to try and mirror the job description in your application. So use keywords from the listing, so things like HCPC registration, clinical diagnostics, specific, refer to the specific discipline that you're applying to, and you want to try and match your skills and experience to the roles, duties, and the required qualifications. As Gavin said, we'll never find someone who's 100% match, but you want to kind of make that matching process as easy as possible for the recruiters. Also, again, as Gavin said, you want to make sure that you're thinking about the transferable skills in other jobs or experiences that you may have had. So what did you learn? What did you get out of the experiences that you've had? And how does that relate to this specific role? Highlight department specific experience if it's mentioned. So is this a microbiology experience that you've had? Is it histo experience that you've had? You want to try and lead with a focused personal statement. So your current status, so for example, that you're a biomedical science graduate, that you have an IBMS accredited degree. Your personal statement should explain why you want the role. And it should mention your career goal, i.e. becoming a registered biomedical scientist. Most importantly, try and emphasize relevant experience, traits, and ideally an enthusiasm for diagnostic healthcare. You want to try and showcase your relevant education, so clearly listing your degree. Make sure you do specify that it is an accredited degree or kind of how far you are away from getting one. Include things like your final year project and key modules related to the job. So we don't want a synopsis of your whole degree, just the relevant bits for this particular role. List your grades, any additional training or certifications that you've done. So things like good laboratory practice, lab safety, COSH. You want to try and emphasize laboratory clinical experience, particularly. So any hands-on work that you've had on placements or any NHS experience that you've had, even outside of the lab, is really useful to know. Because again, you want to be thinking about those transferable skills. Also, any specific methods or techniques that you've been trained to use. So anything like PCR, ELISA, microscopy, any types of software that you've used. If you can show that you are familiar with standard documentation like standard operating procedures, quality control procedures, sample handling, that's all going to be really good stuff to include. In terms of transferable skills, you've heard me kind of refer to those a few times now. So I'm talking about things like communication, teamwork, problem solving, time management, and you really want to link to not just your technical skills, but also your soft skills. So communicating results, managing deadlines. It's really important to bear in mind that your recruiters are incredibly time poor and they will get a lot of applications for each post. So you really do need to keep it concise, clear and professional. So 2 pages is an absolute max in terms of CVs. It's fine to use bullet points as opposed to long paragraphs, that just make it easy to read and scannable. do try and avoid kind of generic fluff. We'll have some examples of that a bit later on. You need to really think about being specific, evidence-based, and job-focused. Okay. Most importantly, as we've been saying, you need to tailor every single time. So you don't want to have one CV that you just send out to everybody. So if it is specifically for a microbiology role, make sure you're just including the things that are specific to microbiology. If it is for a hematology role, you're only including the things that are specific to hematology. Okay, so bearing all of that in mind, I thought it would be fun to have a bit of audience participation. So I do hope that you'll join in with me either via the chat, or if you're feeling brave, do feel free to comment over the mic. And we're going to have a look at some example applicants. I will point out that these are entirely fictional applicants. No graduates were harmed in the making of these CVs. So I'm going to quickly go through them, and then I'd like you guys to try and, based on what we've learned so far in this presentation, I'd like you guys to give some advice to these applicants. So we have our first applicant, who is Bob B. Bobson. His marital status is complicated. He wants to work in science because microscopes are cool, and he's watched an episode of House and he really likes it. He has his degree in he has a Bachelor of Biomedical Engineering. He's done some research dissertation on research about cells. He has done some science A-levels, so he's done biology, chemistry, something else. He's done some work experience. He's worked at McDonald's. He's done some lab shadowing. He's watched somebody use a pipette. He wasn't really allowed to touch it though. In terms of skills, he knows how to use Google. He can probably use Excel if you show him. He's watched some YouTube videos about PCR and he's good with animals. In terms of certification, he's seeing quite a few TikTok videos of CPR, food safety level 1. His reference is Mrs. Bobson. And in terms of his personal statement, he says he is a passionate and dedicated sciencey person who would definitely not contaminate any samples. He's confident and can bring unmatched vibes to the lab team, and he's available for interviews as long as they're not too early. Okay, so this is applicant 1. So guys, what's our advice then? What's our advice for applicant 1? So needs to be more professional in writing. I think that's fair to say. We've got Toshan. Did you want to say something over the mic? Yeah. Lots of unnecessary information. Yeah. Definitely shouldn't use a relative as a reference. Good points.
It's very colloquial, some languages like sciencey, and it's not like very professional. Like there's some, and they haven't used like better vocabularies for their CV. So
yeah, I think that's all fair. He's definitely not coming across as very professional. Needs to change his aim in life, quite possibly. More detail. Yeah, we definitely want more detail. We need him to be a bit more specific. Exactly. So yeah, better structure, more things relating to the specific role. Exactly. So this doesn't really suggest that he knows what the role is at all, really. And yeah, we don't normally say we want to be interviewed as long as it's not too early. He hasn't mentioned if his degree is IBMS accredited, and indeed it isn't even a biomedical science degree. So yeah, what do we think then? What are we giving this applicant out of 10? What do we think? What are we giving him out of 10? Zeros. Oh, so we've got a range at the minute from 0 to 5. Admire his confidence. That's one way to describe it, I suppose. Okay, should we go on to applicant 2? Okay, so applicant 2 has given her personal statement. She says she is a motivated and detail-orientated biomedical science graduate with a solid foundation in laboratory techniques, diagnostics, and clinical research. She's committed to applying evidence-based science to improve patient care and disease prevention. She has completed an accredited IBMS degree with strong academic performance and practical experience during a clinical placement. She's seeking an entry-level biomedical scientist role to contribute to diagnostic services and gain HCPC registration. She's given us her education history in terms of where she's gone to university, that she got a 2-1. She's had her final year project in the role of biomarkers in early detection of ovarian cancer. She lists relevant modules. She lists her A-levels. In terms of her experience, she's talked about her clinical placement. Specifically on the placement, she's talked about the hands-on experience that she gained in hematology, histopathology, and microbiology. Some of the things that she's done around sample preparation. She's talked specifically, she's pulled out things like following the SOPs and maintaining accurate lab records. And she's participated in weekly multidisciplinary case reviews. So she's done a fair bit. In terms of key skills, she's talked about being proficient in Microsoft Office, strong understanding in infection control and lab safety, experience with presenting scientific findings, being able to work independently and within a team. In terms of certification, she's started her portfolio. She's also working on things like certification towards good clinical practice, health and safety, and references on request. So what advice are we giving to applicant 2? How do we think she did? So already we think this one is much better. Why is this one much better? So, much more role specific and professional. Yeah. She listed the key skills that look like they would be aligned to a specific role. Definitely. It's concise, it's professional. There's enough detail in it. She's been specific about her experiences. Yeah, and she's really showcasing the experience that she had. Anything that she can improve on, or do we think this is pretty perfect? What do we think? Anything she could improve on? Possibly more tailored to a discipline, true, because she has spoken about lots of different disciplines, so she could possibly make it more tailored. Yep, she could include things around quality. She could include her references, yeah. Bearing in mind that we need to keep it probably no longer than this, I'd say. I think for me, I think the only line that kind of jumped out to me as not adding much was that she can work independently or within a team. Gavin, how many applications do you see that on?
At least 60%.
Does it mean anything to you?
It means absolutely loads. So with the ability to work independently tells you that someone's been trusted, has been signed off and is competent. And teamwork, we all work as part of a team. I think people often think of scientists as being quite lonely creatures, not in pathology. You are in constant contact with clinical teams, with your colleagues within the laboratory, different disciplines. So I think it's really important to showcase that in an application. Even if it's just part of a sports team, if you haven't done any team working, I think at university, you've all done group presentations. I think there's always something you can pull out and pop into an application from my perspective.
Yeah. So if you're going to comment on kind of working independently or working in a team, you'd really want to try and give some examples of where that's happened. Yeah. Okay, so what are we giving this applicant out of 10? Oh, 8, solid 8s. Yeah, I'd say that's probably reasonable. Okay, and finally, let's have a look at applicant 3. So this one starts with their personal presentation, where they're talking about their life's calling, their journey into the sacred world of biomedical science. So they say that from the moment I dissected my first daffodil in year 4, I knew I wasn't like other children. While my classmates recoiled, I was enthralled, not by the plant itself, but by the mysteries of life it hinted at. That moment ignited a fire in me that has never wavered. Biomedical science is not a career path, it is a divine purpose. My intellect has been described as uncanny and beyond my years, though I remain humble. I am gifted with an almost supernatural ability to understand the microscopic world. Some say that passion fades, but mine only intensifies. Whether reading a journal article at 3 a.m. for fun or rearranging my personal pipette collection in chromatic order, I live and breathe science. I am not merely seeking a job, I am offering the future of biomedical discovery in human form. So they say that their dissertation was exploring the molecular poetry of the human genome, which was called Profound by her professor. She talks about the A-levels that she's done. In terms of experience, she has shadowed a consultant hematologist for 2 hours, where she observed life-changing diagnostics with unblinking focus. She was told that she asks more questions than any other student ever. She's educated the public on germs, and one child even said that it was life-changing. Okay, in terms of research, she likes to do garage experiments on plants and safe food items. In terms of skill, she has empathy beyond measure, a preternatural attention to microscopic detail. She has memorized an entire edition of Nature Reviews for leisure. And she is the team, but she can work with others too. In terms of achievement, she was the winner of the Most Curious Mind, and she has a participation ribbon in year 10 for the Science Olympiad. Okay, so what advice are we giving to applicant 3? So people saying this feels more like a sales pitch. Stands out from the crowd. Well, possibly for the right reasons, possibly not. Perfect CV to work for Disney. Yeah. Claim. I mean, I think this is the main point, isn't it? The claims aren't really backed up with anything. There's no relevant evidence. The CV doesn't mention, as you say, anything about IBMS accreditation, and yeah, as you say, the information is really quite self-indulgent and irrelevant. So kind of, going back to my earlier comment on generic fluff, this is what generic fluff looks like. And again, she talked about plants, so probably not very relevant to biomedical science. So what are we giving this candidate out of 10? Okay, so this is kind of ranging from 0 to 5. They were just edging ahead of applicant 1, but now I'd say they're on about a par with applicant 1. Okay, so putting all this together, then if we can have a look at the next slide, please. In terms of, hopefully we can use these tips and examples to pull together some successful applications that get us an interview. So once we've got to the interview stage, how are we going to go about preparing for that interview? So general knowledge first. You might see questions in the interview like, what attracted you to this role? And that tends to be a sneaky way of asking if you understand what the department does and how you contribute. So it's really important to find out what tests or work the department does. Depending on what band you're applying for, you might be asked about testing principles, so how the test works, or you may be given some basic results to interpret. You will almost certainly be asked a question about quality, because that is what we do, and how you contribute. So for entry-level positions, that might include how you document your work. So for example, filling in maintenance logs, participating in quality control or external quality assurance. It might include adhering strictly to the standard operating procedures, or making sure that you read and acknowledge the SOPs when they're reviewed. You might include things around participating in or performing audits. So if you can talk about specific examples of when you've done things like this, that's a real plus. It's also good if you can link these activities directly to the ISO 15189 standards to show that you really have a good understanding of why we would do these things. You should really try and demonstrate how you apply trust values and behaviors. So you can find out what these are by looking on the trust website, and then have a specific example ready. Alternatively, you might be asking in the interview, they might give you a scenario or a situation and ask you how you would respond, and they'd be looking for your response to then align with the trust's values and behaviors. So again, a bit more audience participation. What I'd like you to do is, if you can, either in the chat or over the mic, give me some specific examples. So very brief examples of where you think you could demonstrate the following. So how might you demonstrate your teamwork? So yeah, group projects at university. Yeah, like creating a presentation with fellow students, definitely. I mean, the tip that I'm going to give for kind of drawing these key skills from as well is try and think like life wide. So it doesn't just have to be in your education, it can be further afield. So as Gavin said, if you're in a football team even, you have to work as a team. It sounds really counterintuitive, but do try and use I statements rather than we statements. So it's really clear what your role in the team was and how you contributed specifically. So yeah, brilliant, being part of a society. Or yep. And next skill. So an example of where you demonstrated initiative. Oh, Duke of Edinburgh, that's a good one. So how could you demonstrate your initiative? You think? So resolving a problem by yourself. Yep, definitely. I think the important thing to bear in mind with initiative is volunteering, definitely. Doing further courses or qualifications, yep, all very good. As I say, I think the important thing about initiative is give examples of how you solved a problem, but it is also really important to show that you stayed within your scope of practice and that you escalated issues appropriately. People will get very nervous if you kind of give examples where you've dismantled an analyzer without telling anybody. So it is kind of very important to show that you're staying within your scope of practice, that you're asking people for advice as needed, that you're letting people know what's going on and keeping people in the loop. So next skill, leadership. So as entry-level biomedical scientists, how might you demonstrate your leadership? Yeah, so being a team captain, delegating tasks, organizing events, president of a society, training, definitely. So yep, all good answers. So at this level, leadership is mainly going to be around setting a good example, about modeling trust values and behaviors, and generally about being supportive of the wider team. Okay, and the one that kind of we all struggle with in the NHS, you know, time management or coping with stress. Managing deadline season, definitely. So what else do you think? What are other ways that you could demonstrate your time management? So here we're often talking about balancing competing demands. So ensuring turnaround times are met, definitely. Managing under pressure. So yeah, we have some very high pressure situations in the NHS. Presenting a dissertation in a time frame at a conference, yeah, definitely. Showing how you prioritize things, yeah. So yeah, great answers. And you know, it's important to bear in mind that things like coping with stress in an interview question could be tied to your HCPC registration and how you maintain your fitness to practice. Okay.